you to ACEEE for organizing this fantastic event, what I'm sure will be a great set of panels for the rest of the day, and thank you for inviting me to provide some short opening remarks. I will try to keep this brief and then answer a few questions if anyone has them. But I wanted to cover today just briefly the challenges that we face in transportation, environmental and otherwise, how I think AVs can either help solve some of those challenges or exacerbate them, what's at the heart of the challenges and the problems, what my company Via is doing to be part of the solution, and then where I think public policy can take us to move us in the right direction. So these will be familiar, I'm sure, to most of you in this room, or all of you, but we have a transportation system where we have increasing congestion and overloaded infrastructure. We have transportation now as the industry with that's the #1 cause of greenhouse gas emissions in our country. Not a title that I think anyone wants to have. And we have a very serious economic and social mobility problem in our country, and that obviously there are many other policy areas that touch on that, but transportation is a major one, that we are not successfully providing affordable, convenient travel to everyone. And the people who are most hurt by this, right, of course, are the most vulnerable in our society: low income, people with disabilities, and the elderly. And I should just say that, particularly the focus today on energy and environmental impacts, my work at the White House was across the domestic policy area with a little bit of international, but I'd say I spent the plurality of my time on environmental and energy issues. So how transportation intersects with our environmental future is something that's dear to my heart, and that I'm very just honored to be talking about today. Okay, so what do I see as sort of at the heart, the main source of these problems that are complicated? What's at the heart of them? At the heart of them, I'm using a GOT analogy, like what is like the Night King of these challenges? It is this guy right here. No, so this is my 2-year-old son, Gibson, and he is not the source of these problems, but it's what this image represents, which is the single passenger, privately driven car. Just imagine with me for a moment, this is not a emissions-free cozy coupe, which is what he's driving here, but a guzzling vehicle. But this is at the heart of our problem. It's the total dominance of the privately driven single passenger vehicle in our transportation landscape. And across virtually any measure you can see this. There's lots of different stats. But one here that I like is that 85% of Americans, we sometimes forget this in our, those of us who live in DC or in the big cities, 85% of Americans commute by car, 90% of them are driving alone. Okay, this is, despite all the developments in the last few years, this is still the dominant form of transportation in our country. And autonomous vehicles hold enormous promise. And I just want to say at the outset that we lose roughly 40,000 people to vehicle accidents every year, which I'm doing the math right, is more than 100 people today, which is tragic and unacceptable. And autonomous vehicles, I don't think there's any question that autonomous vehicles eventually can help eradicate that problem. So there are huge benefits on that front. But for the focus of the conference and the challenges I mentioned on the first slide in terms of congestion, environmental emissions, economic mobility, autonomous vehicles can help solve those problems, but they also can dramatically exacerbate them if we don't manage them in the right way. If we just let them roam around our streets as privately driven vehicles, these phantom vehicles that they just circle. If we all came to this conference in our AVs and we just had our phantom AVs just circling the block outside, you can imagine what that would do to congestion. And sorry, this might be a little hard to see, but this is a slide from UC Davis Institute for Transportation Studies, showing kind of 3 different scenarios and showing that, yes, of course, if we electrify, there are huge positive impacts. But to truly get to where we need to get to in the transportation sector, it's not enough to just electrify, and it's not enough to go autonomous. We have to share the vehicles if we want to realize all the greenhouse gas emission benefits and others. So how do we get there? So we know that public transportation has the ability to defeat the privately driven vehicle, and this is a graph kind of showing cities in the U.S. and transit ridership vis-a-vis the private car. You see that in New York City, it crosses the line where more people take transit than drive their car. But there are some challenges to getting there, right? So subways, which are an extremely efficient way to move huge amounts of people, are prohibitively expensive to build new ones, and it takes a long time. I don't think we are going to be digging massive tunnels. And it also, right, is a solution for cities, not to mention, everywhere else outside of big metropolitan areas. And then buses, right? There are excellent buses out there that are high capacity, high frequency, but for the most part, I think buses are largely inefficient and underutilized. And we have been trying this. There are improvements that can be made, but we have been trying this for decades now, right? The fixed route, fixed schedule bus, and it is not, in my mind, successfully defeating the private car, which is what we need to do. So this is where Via comes in. And Via is a company that has developed technology to manage on-demand, real-time dynamic routing shuttle systems that are affordable, equitable, and convenient. And so this is a project where there was a fixed route bus that was not very popular, not working very well, and the city brought us in to operate an on-demand shuttle network. And you can see in the image on the right that in this system, we can take you effectively every single corner is a bus stop, so we can take you from any corner in the zone to any other corner in the zone. We do typically ask the rider to walk a half a block or a block to a corner to optimize the system efficiency. But this is, you can see that just in how the stops work, this is an equitable system, right? Everybody lives within half a block or a block from a bus stop in this system. And it is accessible, right? And by accessible, I mean that we incorporate wheelchair accessible vehicles. We are serving the population. It's accessible in that there is a call dispatch center. So if you don't own a smartphone, you still have the ability to access this service. And it's accessible in that we have prepay or cash options for folks who are unbanked and don't have credit cards that they can use in and out. And so we have now been working with cities and operating services for a few years, and what we've seen recently is just dramatic growth in the last year. So this map would have had, I don't know, roughly 5 to 7 dots on it, maybe 9 months ago, a year ago. And now we are in more than 60 places across the US and across the world. We've completed more than 50 million rides. So in 5 of these, or 6 of these places, we operate our own service. So when the company started, and we went to the MTAs of the world and say, hey, we have this great technology to help improve your buses. I don't think they knew what to do with that, and they didn't know who our CEO was. And so what happened was we launched our own service in New York City and grew it out from there. So in 6 of these places, we operate a service that effectively competes with other TNCs, but it's a service that is almost exclusively pooled rides. And the technology was built to maximize pooled rides, aggregation, and efficient routing from day one. So that's 6 of these, the blue ones there. Everywhere else on this map, we are partnering with cities, transit agencies, and other operators to provide public transit. And so in these systems, we are providing on-demand shuttles or buses. The vehicle size is range. But we are doing this across the world, and we are just seeing a huge new interest in cities. We are seeing requests for proposals, RFPs, coming out every single week across the world seeking services like this. So just to give you a few quick examples, in Los Angeles, in a partnership with LA Metro, and in Seattle, which is a partnership with King County Sound Transit in the city of Seattle, we have come in partnership with the city to provide a first mile, last mile service to connect folks from certain neighborhoods to transit hubs that those cities have. I think it's 3 transit hubs in LA and 5 in Seattle. There's a particular focus on getting folks from low-income areas to the transit hubs there. So both of those cities are interested in feeding more people into the public transit system. A lot of cities we partner with are losing ridership to TNCs, and so they see this as a way to innovate and bring more people in. Seattle, Seattle is one of the few cities in America with rising transit ridership. They're already doing remarkable things to get more people onto transit, but they see this service as yet another way to feed more people into the system. Arlington, Texas, for decades, the largest city in the United States with no public transit. It's a city of roughly 400,000 people. They then had literally one bus line, that was not very successful, and they were ending that. So they put out a request, which we won, and we now operate the only public transit in that city. It's a fleet of on-demand minivans, which you can see there, which people can order on their smartphone or phone. In Sittingbourne in the UK, I put this one up here because this is something that's closer to a suburban rural area. This is roughly an hour or 90 minutes outside of London. And it's also an example of a service where we just licensed our technology. So this is Arriva, which is a private bus operator in the UK. It's their vehicles, their drivers. We just give them the technology so they can operate in an on-demand dynamic way. And it's into its second year now, and it's been a great project connecting folks from a rail station to a job center and all around the town. And then Berlin, I wanted to mention, is the largest deployment of on-demand vehicles as public transit in the world, which is something we operate as part of our joint venture with Daimler Mercedes-Benz, which is called Via Vans in Europe. And it's at roughly 150 vehicles now. It's ramping up to 300. And it's interesting about this one is that most of the fleet is electric, so we're learning lots of lessons about how do you operate a transit system and make sure the vehicles, in addition to picking up people and dropping them off and collecting them all in the right places, also are able to get charging infrastructure in a way that makes sense and in a way that operates efficiently. There are other examples in Michigan. We just got an award from the governor to power a paratransit service in Grand Rapids. In Coffs Harbour in Australia, we are doing a AVs pilot with Easy Mile, which is an autonomous vehicle company. And the connection here to AVs, if it's not obvious, is that we think it's important that they be shared when they come. And so all these deployments are ultimately one day we think going to lead to public transit autonomous vehicle deployments. And then in places like West Sacramento, where we're operating a service similar to Arlington, the city just came out with a report showing sort of how it's popular across the Asian income spectrum. And I can throw a bunch of stats out at you, but I think my favorites, my very, very favorite quote about Via, my CEO might be disappointed that it's not something he said, but my favorite quote from Via is from an 80-year-old woman in West Sacramento named Gail Hoffman, who referred to our service there as, quote, the best thing since bacon. I love bacon, so maybe this quote is particularly meaningful to me, but it's, this is, right, it's not just about this cool technology and providing these new services, it's about actually moving people and creating new opportunities and new economic mobility. And Gail Hoffman had trouble getting around her community, right? She couldn't drive a car anymore. She actually, she says that other options are too expensive for seniors. And so this affordable public transit option that we were able to do together with the city with a low flat fare is now her way of getting to the grocery store, and her way of seeing her friends, and her way of getting around her community. So by now you can probably tell that I think pooled rides is really important, and that's what Via is doing. But I just wanted to note that it's been great to see in the last couple of years the academic community also start to do analysis and understand and recognize and call out the importance of pooled rides. And this is a quote from Dan Sperling, who runs the UC Davis Institute of Transportation Studies, who for many, many years has been one of the leading voices on electric vehicles. And this is from his book, which I commend to all of you. But here he is talking about how he thinks the real answer to our issues is pooling. And when Dan refers to pooling, he's referring to public transit and also pooling of sedans and smaller vehicles, and how we can get at all these issues, which I was identifying at the beginning of my presentation, and how it's also critical to automated vehicle future. And then his final note there is, it needs to be the principal focus of our policy and thinking. So how do we put that, Dan's command there at the bottom, how do we put that into practice? I just wanted to give you, it's a complicated area, I want to give you just a few quick examples. So, I work a lot at the local level with our cities, and I think one thing we need to do is get much more smarter about how we price our roads and tax vehicles on our streets. And so I wanted to give you a few just quick real life examples here, based on, hopefully I'm not terribly dating myself with the good, the bad, and the ugly. Hopefully some people here are fans of this film. But in New York City, right, we just passed comprehensive congestion pricing, which is fantastic because although we can quibble about the details of how it's going to be implemented, many of which are still to be determined, it's a recognition that we need to charge all vehicles, that all vehicles, privately driven vehicles, TNCs, trucks, tour buses, all vehicles have impact on our streets, and we should be pricing all of them. And so I think this was a major, major step forward, not only for the city, but for the nation that New York State passed that. They last year passed a new congestion fee on TNCs, which are called for-hire vehicles in New York. I'll just refer to them as TNCs here. It's $2.75 on single passenger, but 75 cents on pooled. So this was the first place in the nation to recognize that there's a difference in impacts between pooled and single passenger vehicles. Quickly, DC, which is typical of many cities, taxes pooled and single passenger the same way. They do it on a percentage basis, which I think is better than a flat fee, but no distinction between pooled and single passenger. And then what I refer to as the ugly, which is Chicago, which is the highest flat fee on TNC bookings in the country, 72 cents now. So every time you book a ride in Chicago, it's 72 cents. It doesn't matter if it's a $4 pool ride or a $50 private ride to the airport, right? So that's a $4 pool ride, that's an 18% tax. And what are folks who are low income most likely to take if they're accessing this technology, right? They're most likely to take the lowest cost option, which is typically the pooled option. And so this is a regressive policy that, inadvertently, I don't think they were trying to do this, inadvertently penalizes pooled rides. Very quickly, I'm running out of time here. I think we need more of these public-private partnerships. You won't be surprised to hear me say, yes, we should be doing AV pilots where it makes sense, but we also just need more public-private partnerships on innovative mobility and public transit, which are going to help teach, I think, really important lessons for how these things will be structured down the road. And the thing is, we don't have to wait for AVs, right? We can improve mobility, we can reduce greenhouse gas emissions, we can reduce congestion today. Like, we have technology to do it today. Obviously AVs are going to play a role, but we don't need to wait for them to start solving these problems. And then just very quickly on the federal front, obviously the federal government has a major role to play. Here are two quotes about moving to a VMT type fee, which I think is certainly a direction we need to go in. One is from Representative Fazio, the other is Representative Graves. These are not just any two members of Congress, these are the chairman and ranking member of the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. And so I think it's encouraging that there is now bipartisan interest in looking at a VMT. And then I think we need to spend money more effectively. So I think it would be good if there were larger competitive grant programs that encourage innovation and public transit partnerships. And then maybe longer term, I think around formula funding, it would be good if there was a bit more flexibility in how that money is spent, and with more stronger performance metrics and accountability built in. In general, right now, the federal transit funding system is not structured in a way to support these types of innovative partnerships. And so just one final note, as we think forward to autonomous vehicles, as you hear more about that today, that what we learned early in life still holds true. You saw that picture of my son early on with his cool sunglasses, but sort of a stern look on his face. And I think the key to happiness in our future is sharing. This is with his cousin Milo, but this is this is what it's about. Right? It's not about Via's cool technology or what other companies can provide. It's about improving mobility today and shaping a better future for our kids down the road. That's it for my remarks. I don't know if there's time. I'm happy to take a question or two, but thank you very much for listening.